The film you are about to see brings you face to face with one of the most important challenges of our times, protecting and empowering the world's women during and after conflict. This is a top priority for the entire United Nations system and for me personally as Secretary General. Women's experiences of war are different than those of men. That is one of key insights contained in Security Council Resolution 1325, adopted in the year 2000, and the landmark step in raising global awareness about women, peace, and security. The resolution also recognized that women are a powerful yet untapped force for peace. Our challenge is to act on this understanding. The peacekeeping missions we deploy and the peace negotiations we support must have gender equality at their heart. We also have a collective responsibility to combat sexual violence against women and girls, to seek justice and end impunity for these crimes. The documentary you are about to see shows what the United Nations and its partners are doing to meet this challenge. You will meet peacekeepers, activists, humanitarians and survivors, women and men across the world who are champions of this cause. You will hear difficult testimony about the obstacles we face and about the mindsets that are often so hard to change. But you will also hear from women who have survived the conflict or overcome other difficulties to make a real difference for their communities and our common future. But our achievements have not yet matched the magnitude of the challenge. I am strongly committed to doing more. I urge viewers everywhere to do their part. Empowering women and girls for peace and development is the smartest and most overdue investment the international community can make in securing a just and peaceful future for all.
In October 2000, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 1325. This resolution highlighted how women are particularly affected by conflict and recognized that women's full participation in peace processes can significantly contribute to the maintenance and promotion of international peace and security. Since the adoption of Resolution 1325, the issue of women, peace and security has continued to gain attention, with growing recognition that engagement with women and their active participation in decision-making are instrumental to the protection of women and the prevention of armed conflict, and that the increased participation of women in post-conflict decision-making and recovery is a linchpin to sustainable peace.
For a long time, women didn't really get to have a place at the tables which were negotiating peace, seeing through the post-conflict agendas, developing the strategies going forward. So the UN Security Council had this landmark resolution on women, peace and security.
It recognized that women suffer differently on conflict and that they needed specific policies and programs. But on the other hand, they acknowledged that women were part of the solution.
So everything from how to address women's participation in demobilization, reintegration processes, how to ensure that in the security sector reform processes, women's participation and protection issues are being addressed.
And ever since, women all over the world have adopted it as their platform for enabling them to argue the case for them to be involved in peace processes.
For the past 21 years, women have been a symbol of resilience in Somalia. Men have gone to fight, families have been separated, and the victims have been mainly women. But it is the women who have succeeded to keep their families together. It is the women who have shown the way.
There was one woman I met who we were talking about needs in terms of food and water and shelter. And she said to me, but what I really need the most is white cloth. And I looked at her and said, white cloth, what would you be needing that for? And she said, the least I can do, she said, I couldn't feed my children, but the least I can do is give them an honourable burial. And that voice, that incredibly powerful mother's voice, for her recovery and for getting society back together and being able to at least say that they had been dying with dignity was something that was so important. And I think that those voices have to be heard.
Women make up 50% of the population. How can you possibly attempt to create and maintain international peace and security when you're excluding 50% of the population?
Women and girls are those most affected by violence and conflict should also be seen as change makers, as peace builders, as people who can create a future.
It's not going to just happen overnight because we are changing the ways in which people are thinking about peace and security. It's about those community groups and the responsibility of the state first and foremost to ensure that there is a safe space for people to be able to talk and engage and raise issues, that there are systems of the state, particularly the police, to provide the kind of protection that anyone in the society, it's not just about women's protection, but everyone.
You know, in the war, we are just survive one day. If you sleep until tomorrow, you thank God.
Any refugee camp, women, they suffer there. Violence is too much. It's too much. It's many. Anyway, you go to fresh water, it's violence. You go to market, it's violence.
We used to go fishing with some ladies to get soup. They were staying in a bush washing your. After fishing, when you catch fish, they come with their collars. They say, give me everything.
If women go out looking for food, they might be captured by rebels and they will be used as a human shield.
It's very hard for women out there that are living there.
Conflicts in the latter part of the 20th century drew international attention to the vulnerability and exploitation of women as victims of gender-based violence and as the chief sufferers of dispossession and displacement.
Conflict disrupts people's lives, and women and children particularly are the first to be displaced.
And they lose their lands and they lose everything. Even after conflict ends, women will not go back to farm. They won't go back to the productive activities. Girls won't go back to school because there are no securities.
I have accounts from women, giving birth near creeks. A lot of young girls who were caught in the war, who never went to finish school, high school or senior high school, and they were forced to get married as teenagers, just so that they had a man to stand by them for protection.
It's really important that we look at the range of threats and the range of experience that crises have on women and men. So to ensure that, say, women that are displaced by a conflict or crises have sufficient assistance, such as food and water and shelter.
And there are big issues for people in terms of the violence that they have encountered, the abuse that they've encountered, all of which has a huge impact on them psychologically.
Women and children, and occasionally men, are subject to sexual violence in conflict zones, and this is often used as a weapon of war. The international community has recognized this and started to respond.
I think we're fighting these three misconceptions. First, that it is inevitable, that this is a part of every war since the beginning of time. Secondly, that it is unspeakable, that this is it's about sex, they think, or it's about something that is so shameful that it should not be mentioned, and the shame falls on the victims and not the perpetrators. And thirdly, that this is a lesser crime.
Perpetrators are using sexual violence to displace populations, for instance, to send messages, to send signals. It's in a sense a method of total warfare.
You are a 20-year-old young lieutenant or lance corporal going on a night patrol, and you face a 13-year-old girl having been gang raped by 4 either rebels or Congolese or government soldiers. What are you going to do? I have been for 39 years in Marine Corps. I thought that I had seen all the atrocities that you can think of. I was not prepared for sexual violence. What I saw on sexual violence, I was not. So if I'm not prepared, then how can be the lance corporal that we were talking about, facing this 13-year-old girl being gang raped? What are you going to do? You cannot walk away from it. You have to take action.
Peacekeeping operations play an important role in the protection of women and girls. Specialized training for peacekeepers on how to address conflict-related sexual violence has been developed. However, what is also needed to support this is better system-wide protection of the vulnerable, including better data to enable better responses to sexual and gender-based violence. Many actors, both international and local, are working to achieve this.
In the Congo, we have organized networks of people around the villages, actually supplying them with cell phones, so then immediate information that allows us to react. And we have also organized small patrols to escort women going to the marketplace.
We have the concept of community policing to actually engage the communities through the process and bridging the gap between the communities and the police to ensure that they are able to provide that protective blanket.
Women and girls, they know themselves what the threats are that they face, and they should be determining the solutions. So no matter how difficult it is to access them, no matter what the security issues are, it's absolutely imperative that women and girls are involved in the design of the solutions for them.
Invest heavily in women, listen to the women in the villages, advocate with your opponents to stop that violence. Make sure that your troops are really prepared for it.
While system-wide protection is improving, the international community has also strengthened its mechanisms to hold perpetrators to account. The Secretary-General is now able to list those parties credibly suspected of committing or being responsible for patterns of sexual violence in situations on the Security Council's agenda.
In international humanitarian law, the law of war, you find in the 4 Geneva Conventions and their 2 additional protocols many statements about the fact that sexual violence is prohibited. We see at the International Criminal Court that sexual violence is a war crime. Prosecuting sexual violence, even in peacetime, is a very difficult thing. How do we do it without further making the life and the experience of the survivor horrific?
I think we need equally as serious and intense focus and spotlight on men as perpetrators. When we travel, we ask the question, well, what does it cost in this community to rape a girl? The question is not understood at first. Well, what do you mean, cost? And this is what we have to change.
Sadly, sometimes those responsible for providing protection may be the perpetrators. In field operations where international organizations are operating, women and children who are caught up in conflict are particularly vulnerable and can be sexually exploited by those charged with their protection. Sexual exploitation and abuse, whenever it occurs, not only harms the victims, but also jeopardizes the reputation of the organizations involved.
The Secretary General has made it extremely clear, loud and clear, that he wanted zero tolerance.
The reality is that external actors, such as humanitarian agencies, such as peacekeeping forces, are in an immensely powerful position. It's critical that the external actors, humanitarian agencies, military forces, police forces, they've got proper training, proper processes in place around child protection, around sexual abuse and the like. That's vital.
The first thing is education, to be educated. Because all these people, especially women, we are suffering. We don't know what to do, and then we don't know what is going on. Because most of women, we didn't go to school.
If a group of women work for peace and security, for example, at the military area or as a police woman, then other young girls will be encouraged to join them.
I do to put the story of back home to our children, and I do to tell them, be the children for the future. Because the country with war, there is no any benefit. Be a peace, be a children of peace.
As well as effective responses to violence, a greater emphasis on preventing the impact of conflict on women is fundamental to moving the women, peace and security agenda forward. Incorporating a gender perspective in conflict prevention activities and strategies and recognizing the role of women in preventing conflict is key.
We need to still continue working stronger to see how we can prevent violence against women from happening. We have done a lot, and we have been training our peacekeepers and peace forces.
First of all, just understanding that vulnerability, but beyond that, ensuring that we address it from a preventive perspective, educating women and girls about those vulnerabilities and empowering them to be able to prevent gender-based violence.
Early warning indicators allow steps to be taken to recognize and address further escalation of conflict.
We recently compiled a matrix of early warning signs and indicators of conflict-related sexual violence. Things like escalated anti-women propaganda, changes in women's mobility patterns, women no longer going to markets, girls no longer attending schools, women seeking abortions and reproductive health care, things like that indicating that sexual violence was going on under the radar.
Police play a key role in prevention by working at the community level in both cities and villages.
What more can be done is to have a more preventive approach, and that could be early warning systems, build a trust amongst themselves to know how to react when they see threats or they see something coming.
Many new strategies have been developed to increase the international community's capacity to respond to violence against women, including by using female interpreters, data collectors, gender advisors, and female police officers. With these new approaches, interactions and communication with women and the local community becomes more effective and leads to a better understanding of the community's needs.
I had an experience in one refugee camp. I tried to speak with the women there, tried to find out if they have other problems and food and so on. And the translator was a man, and women would tell me, no, everything's fine, everything's fantastic. And then I went into a small room with a small group of women with a female translator, and the kind of things that happened were completely different. Everything was happening, from FGM, from rape, and so on.
Everywhere we have female officers deployed, we see the difference. Their understanding of the situation in order to have an early warning, and also their capacity to listen, the confidence that they can build immediately with the women that are in difficulties are an important asset.
One of the things that the UN did, which really helped a lot to encourage women to join the police, was the deployment of an all-female formed police unit from India to Liberia.
I was impressed with their professionalism and their expertise. I asked to be taken on night patrol in Monrovia. And as the headlights swept around this bend, there were 3 uniformed police officers, a Liberian national police officer, another international female police officer, and a member of the all-female formed police unit, who was the only one who was armed. And I could see the other 2 were feeling comfortable that she was there and providing that protection.
The women decided to create their own mechanism called the peace huts. They didn't want to call them trouble, they wanted to call them something positive. And inside those peace huts, they're also adjudicating on issues of marital disputes, small property disputes, domestic violence issues. The police are now reporting in some communities that they're getting fewer and fewer calls about domestic violence because the peace hut women are actually solving these problems before they escalate into violence.
Recently, governments have been developing national action plans to support the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda.
They set out a range of activities that you're actually going to undertake to promote women, peace and security, and then they actually make governments accountable.
A key factor in preventing violence against women and in ensuring their inclusion in peace building is the need for strong role models, both male and female.
We consult with men of all ages because it's often the men who will be working as advocates in their communities, as leaders in their communities to speak out against violence.
Removing discrimination against women by providing equal property rights, access to their inheritance, and equal opportunities in education is an important preventative step.
In many post-conflict situations, up to 40% or more of households are female-headed because of male death, disappearance, desertion, migration. In African societies, women cannot inherit or cannot assume automatically the property of their disappeared spouses. So they may often be destitute, lacking any productive assets upon which they can build a post-conflict livelihood.
Young women, young mothers, teenage mothers were coming out now to seek help for especially functional literacy and functional meds. You know, a young mother will tell you, a nurse gives me medicine to take home for my child. I need to be able to read, like how much 5 meals is when I go to a store. I need to know that I've been given the right change.
nabaddu way ka shaqayn lahaayeen laakiin xorba ma ahan ayay markasta maxay tad dhibaatada lagu haya marka waxba kama qaban karaan ilmahooda.
It's not we feel, it's how we grow up. Women will not have anything to say. I think they need to know their right. They need to know they have right to speak out. They need to know they can bring peace.
Give empowerment to women to have a say in this war. We want to stop the war because war is killing our children.
We really want the world attention to be continued for women's support in Afghanistan, and that's the only hope of Afghan women.
We need to stand firm. We need to let the people know that some of these things are wrong. They are not good for us anymore.
The situation is, yes, is very hard. Women courageous and perseverance. Educated the human, no give up, no, be strong.
Our contributions in peacemaking is very, very important because as women, we too have greater ideas that we can give to the communities. So we should be involved in peacemaking.
Resolution 1325 and subsequent resolutions call for strengthening women's participation as peacemakers and peace builders, including in peace processes and governance mechanisms. While the benefits of including women in conflict resolution and peace building are well documented, the reality is that women are largely excluded from formal peace processes and the institutions that can prevent, manage and resolve conflict.
during 1990 to 2010, you've seen more than 565 peace agreement and peace settlement. Only in 16% of them, the word women issue is mentioned. Only in 7% of them, gender equality or women's rights is mentioned. And only 3% of them, gender-based violence is mentioned. In all of them, there was gender-based violence and women's rights were violated. But to tell you that it's not yet there, we're not yet there.
One of the problems is, of course, is that these conflicts seem to be endemic and they repeat themselves over and over again. And we need to beat that cycle. We need to start solving problems other than just letting the 3 or 4 guys who were leading the armies sit down and cut and take the results and try to divide them up among themselves. So it's absolutely critical that over half of the society that's there, it's bearing most of the brunt, be involved in the peace agreements.
All the civil society conferences we've been holding, workshops, we always insist that there must be 30% women representation. There's still resentment, particularly in the establishment, about such representation. They're not allowed to have a say when women are discussing. They're not allowed to take part in decision-making and all of that. Those traditions still persist.
Rwanda is the one I like to quote most, where 34% of parliamentarians are women. And it's not just having women in parliament, but then seeing the bills that are passed as a result. And one can see the results there today. Women's role in public life, for me, is very important.
The power of women's own advocacy must not be underestimated. International support for local organizations can help to strengthen the voices of women around the world.
A lot gets said about the need for capacity building and capacity strengthening, and that is certainly there. But there is also a lot of capacity that does exist within these communities.
We also, as a humanitarian organization, very often work with women to try and find solutions for other women. So one also has to remove a little bit this notion that women are only victims. No, they're very much actors of their situations. They want to influence, and therefore one also has to work with their sense of resilience and their real capacities to influence change among their community.
We need to support very strong women's organizations that have been in their own countries fighting for peace, and to help them that their voices will be heard, because they are there, they have been doing their job.
I can cite the movement known as Mothers for Peace, the members of which do a lot of capacity building for women in their area. They also mobilize resources for small projects. They link up the women in the communities to other institutions so that they can find out how these agencies can help these women on the ground.
Even in very so-called repressive societies, you will find a plethora of women's organizations who are working very, very hard to build peace in their communities. That's not to say that it's easy or that it's not very dangerous for some of them.
While the Women, Peace and Security agenda has progressed, and strategies and training tools have been developed to empower and achieve better protection, prevention and participation of women, more remains to be done. Building effective institutional arrangements to guarantee women's protection and their full participation in peace processes will pay dividends by building a better, more resilient future, which will support the maintenance and promotion of international peace and security.
There's a lot of skills, a lot of training, a lot of support, a lot of empowerment of women to be done. But what we know is that women are peacemakers, that women want to be involved, that they've played very important roles in a number of countries which have been through great trauma. And from the best experiences and practices we've seen around the world, we can support other women too to play these roles.
Imagine the discussion that would happen if 20 men were in a room talking about what they need for the future. Then imagine the discussion if 20 women were in the room talking about what they need for the future. Both discussions are going to be incredibly different and varied, but imagine if we had a room where we had 10 women and 10 men talking about what they need for the future and how they can build a sustainable peace for the future generations.
So challenge ourselves, set benchmarks that deliver on the standards. It has to have real impact, which is visible. The judge of our effort is ultimately the communities that we are serving.
What the international community needs to do at this point is take responsibility for the commitments it's already made. Every time there's work done on preventive diplomacy, every time there's work done in a peace process, every time there's rebuilding financing support given to the rebuilding of institutions post-conflict, the questions must be asked. Where are women, and am I including women's rights in all of these efforts?
So I think that would be great for women, if they want them to involve in peacemaking. So we do everything equally, not equally, but side by side.
We were always in the back. We want to come to front and walking with the men side by side, side by side. Oh, side by side, side by side. Oh, side by side, side by side. We are always at the back. We want to be in front and walking with the men side by